It's a great joy to be back, and although Pastor has said that I'm very passionate about this subject, I'm still trying to learn something about this subject. It's a very critical subject, and in the last almost 10 years, I've been engaged in asking some difficult and challenging questions. I was in charge of theology at the National Council of Churches of Kenya, and it was difficult for me to understand how our society operates the way it does, and why it always seems to be like the Christian community is in retreat and in defense, instead of being at the forefront of leadership. When you read the scriptures, in the book of Genesis, God created mankind and all the resources that we have available. Genesis is very amazing in its description of the concept of life that God had in mind for mankind. How would it feel like for you if flowing out of your area of residence are 4 rivers? One of them winds out and it has got gold, which you don't need to go anywhere deep to mine. As the water flows, you see gold shining on the side. The Bible says this is the kind of garden that God made Eden to be, and where he placed mankind. So God's concept of life for mankind is one of safety, prosperity, peace, joy, love, fellowship, mutual interaction. It's an amazing concept of life for mankind. Of course, we all know what happened for all that to fall away, so that this morning we can be talking about greed and the rich-poor divide. The other thing that I will remind you is that then, after the fall of mankind, God decides to set up a new family. He calls Abraham, through his son Isaac and Jacob, he sets up a people that he describes as a people called by my name. He takes them into Egypt for about 400 years and waits for them to become many tribes. And then he calls them out of Egypt to form them into a nation. And he's doing that because he would like to have a witness on earth of a particular people that form the kind of society which God expects all societies to be. So he raised Israel to be the nation out of which his light would flow to the other nations. Obviously, because of sin, because of the fall, Israel failed many times. But even in their failure, they have outdone the rest of the nations of the world combined in many ways. One just wonders what it would have been like if Adam never sinned, what it would have been like if Israel never went the directions it chose to go repeatedly. But I say that because in calling them out of Egypt, if you read Leviticus chapter 25, he gives instructions of how they were going to live. I will highlight a few verses from this text. He told Israel, when he called Israel out of Egypt, the Exodus tells us their journey out, their arrival at Mount Sinai, and God beginning to establish them as a nation. There are 4 critical things that one sees Number one, he has called them to worship. So he gives them the tabernacle, he gives them the law, he gives them the priesthood. He is leading them to the promised land, which is Canaan, and so he gives them his word. So Israel has the Lord, they have the law, they have the tabernacle, and they have the land. And he wants to form them into a society. So the book of Leviticus describes the ground rules, if you like, that arise out of the 10 commandments which he gave them, which are descriptive of the way the society ought to operate in all matters of life. They have been used to living in the strange land of Egypt, but now they are being formed into their own nation, and so God is concerned that they are going to develop a way of life that is godly. We call it culture. And so if he gives the ground rules of what they ought to do about barely everything, how to marry, how to farm, how to take care of your hygiene, all these things are described in clarity. If they would do these things on a regular basis, scientists have proved that it takes 21 days of the practice of something for it to become a habit. If a society is to apply this kind of ground rules consistently for some time, a new culture emerges that within it is imbued with worship, is imbued with justice, is imbued with fairness, is imbued with hard work. And so these various dimensions of human society are coming together more or less in the same way like a balanced diet does generate a healthy life in a human being. Each one of them is important. How to relate to others, how to relate to God, how to relate to the environment, how to manage your own cleanliness, how to manage cleanliness with regard to the temple, how to manage farming, how to manage food, how to share. All these things, as they are being done by the people together, they are developing a particular way of life that then results in the people of God, and this is what I'm presenting to the rest of the world. The problem, however, is that mankind, as you all know, even at Mount Sinai itself, demonstrated that they could be corrupted so easily and fall away from God's purposes and intentions. And so you have two trajectories that are playing out here: God's expectation versus man's fallenness and inability to live up to what God has called them to be. I listened partly to the presentation by our dear brother Jonjo Mue, and as I listened to that presentation, I was very appreciative of a lot of the things that he said, because I didn't listen to all of it. That's why I'm saying a lot of. I'm sure if I did, I would have appreciated the whole of it. But then I decided that when I come here in this presentation, I will take the approach of reflecting on what I think we should do, rather than spending a lot of time on depressing you with statistics. But I need to say, though, that that's not because I haven't come across statistics that tell us where we are as a country. In the SID research to which Njonjo referred, I will read the following: that in 2005-06, almost 47% or 17 million Kenyans were unable to meet the cost of buying the amount of calories sufficient to meet the recommended daily nutritional requirements and minimum non-food needs. The vast majority, 14 million, live in rural areas, and many are very poor. Indeed, almost 1 out of every 5 could not meet the cost of this minimum food bundle, even if they spend their entire budget on food. Over a long term, little inroads have been made in reducing poverty. Over the past 25 years, the officially estimated poverty rate was 48% in 1981. This record is not surprising in light of the weak growth performance over the period overall. and high levels of inequality across households. The overall trend in the official data since 1997 is consistent with the alternative sources that are used to triangulate the economic growth after 2003 is expected to triangulate the results. In particular, Tegemeo's analysis of rural trends excluding pastoral areas. The acceleration of economic growth after 2003 is expected to have reduced poverty, but national data is not available to confirm this, although Tegemeo shows rural reductions in poverty continuing through 2007. Inequality measured across the distribution of household consumption is high, especially when one of the top 10% to the bottom 10% stood at 20 to 1 and 12 to 1 in urban and rural areas respectively. In other words, these economists, they divide the entire population into groups of 10, and the top 10 is considered the very richest, the bottom 10 is considered the very poorest. It is said that the top 10% in Kenya control 42% of national resources. They are in charge. So top 10, the bottom 10, less than 2%. And so inequality is a reality that we face. The challenge for me, as a person in charge of theology within the National Council of Churches, and perhaps one of the reasons why, as I continue to grow, I have decided to go into training of pastors and theologians, is because of needing to reflect and facilitate a certain type of reflection that shifts our approach to these issues from one of reaction to one of strategic engagement. And I will say that then, because as I have already said this morning, the Lord set up the nation of Israel, and within his terms of reference, he gave them what they need to do in order to keep the society in order. In verse 8 of Leviticus 25, he says, "Count off 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbaths of years amount to a period of 49 years. Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement. Sound the trumpet throughout your land. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each one of you is to return to his family property, and each to his own clan. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the unattended vines. For it is a jubilee and is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the fields. In this year of jubilee, everyone," and you see, I hope you are following with me as we read the scriptures. "In this year of jubilee, everyone is to return to his own property. If you sell land to one of your countrymen or buy any from him, do not take advantage of each other. You are to buy from your countryman on the basis of the number of years since the jubilee. And he is to sell to you on the basis of the number of years left for harvesting crops. When the years are many, you are to increase the price. And when the years are few, you are to decrease the price, because what he is really selling you is the number of crops. Do not take advantage of each other, but fear your God. I am the Lord your God." What's going on here? The world today largely, if you go to Google, which is one of the search engines that we use a lot for various types of research, as you all know, you will find that if you Google economic theories, there will be anything between 50 and 100 economic theories. People who are studying society and trying to explain to us how society works. Two are significantly known in history. The first one is called capitalism. In capitalism, it's survival for the fittest, really. Supply and demand determines what's available on the market. If you have the strength, the capacity, the means, the connections to make money, you don't look around to see what others are doing. You just make money. If you have a chance to be a billionaire, you just become a billionaire. And if you read the scriptures well, God understands how these things work, or rather explain to us when he said, and to those who have, more is given, for some reason. And to those who don't have, even the little that they have is taken away from them. That's exactly how the capitalist system operates. So the capitalist system creates regulations in society that allow you to make choices about what you desire to do, to engage with the best of your strength, best of your connections, and not to feel embarrassed at all about the kind of money you make. In the socialist society, government takes over and manages resources and attempts to manage the people's collective energies so that they produce what is owned by the society and then redistributes equally to all. Now, you know that each of these two systems have problems. For example, Kenya and Tanzania can be some descriptions of this kind of approaches in our own East Africa region. Kenya, based on the exposure of the late Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, just became capitalist from the beginning. And you know that the divide between Kenyatta and Odinga was actually a divide of capitalism and socialism. The Odinga Mzee was saying, when we get the land back, we distribute equally to Kenyans. Kenyatta was saying there's nothing for free. If you want land, you buy. So it was capitalist, socialist. And if you listen carefully to the political discussion even now, it has hints of this. One group saying we need to distribute more, another one saying we need to create a playing field where people excel in their capacities. Now, these two have their own weaknesses and their own strengths. They have their own good intentions. Amazingly, one leading scholar called Max Weber found that actually capitalism was greatly boosted by Protestant ethics. In the 15th and 16th century, when the Protestant churches formed themselves out of the Catholic Church, they emphasized hard work. Hard work became a virtue. They emphasized the freedom to be productive and to enjoy what you have produced. They were rejected by the generally overly Catholic society, and so they had to withdraw and make do within their own communities. What happened is that their hard work, because it was a godly thing, it was seen as a spiritual thing to work hard and to be productive. So when you went to work, you saw it as an opportunity to serve God. So the work became something nice and attractive. What resulted is that they had a lot of productivity. And so they were able to begin, they could not consume all of it. So saving became inevitable. And the savings now dictated that they find a safe way of how to manage these things. One of those safe ways was to create banks. Barclays Bank, for example, was created by the Quakers. They were not allowed to operate in the general society. They were not recognized anywhere because they had split. But they went into the society, they worked hard, they became rich, they had so much money. They decided, let's look for a more official way of how to manage this and to make this credit available to others. They set up a bank. When you walk into Barclays Bank today, they don't remember that they have Christian roots. So capitalism arose because for the first time, there was a community of people that was thinking differently about greed. They were not thinking about greed. They were thinking about the virtue of holiness and righteousness. They were producing quality. The quality that they produced became feasible on the market. People look for Quaker oats, Quaker jam, anything written Quaker, people want it. Why? Because they are sure the quality is high. Now, these people who did not intend to make any money find that their products are in high demand. And so a lot of money is being made, and then they are trying to save it, and in the process, providing the capital that inspires capitalism. They then went on to create the Cadbury chocolate industry and others. So Christianity has the capacity to reorganize society even when it is thrown out. And I want to speak to us particularly about this with the hope that it generates an understanding of assurance and a need for us to begin where we are. God is telling Israel, if you organize yourselves in this way, you worship me, you live with one another in justice, you work hard, I will bless your efforts, and all the nations of the earth will look to you. You shall be a light to the nations, a people called by my name. Israel enters Canaan, and you can be sure anytime Israelites have been in Canaan, it has prospered, even in their weakest moments. Paul writes in the book of Romans chapter 11, if their falling away is salvation for the world, what about their return? Very significant question. They consistently underperformed, but even with a little grace of God that was manifested to them, they are far ahead of the world. 25% of all the Nobel Peace Prizes in the world have been won by Jewish people, even when they are not concerned about God. So there is great hope when our Christian people begin to think strategically and wonder, what's the opportunity that exists for us? Now, if I fast forward, so the Jubilee concept, therefore, was a concept that recognized that when we get into society, of necessity, there will be people with different capacities and abilities. And when they begin to function, some will obviously become richer than others. With time, those that do not demonstrate capacity to keep up with the rest will find that they need to employ other means to survive. For example, selling land. You all know when they got into Canaan, every family was allocated land in equal measure. So how does God begin with us? He allocates everybody the basic resources that are required. He then invites each one of us to be responsible and to work hard and to manage what we have properly. There will be those disparities because there will be some that are faithful, that are working hard. There will be many others that are, for various reasons, unable to keep up with the rest of the pack. In 49 years, 49 years is a long enough time for those that are getting rich to get richer, for those that are getting poor to get poorer. The ones who seem to be getting richer because of working the land, they are gaining experience on productivity, on how to employ people, on how to make products available to the market, and soon their property, what they are producing is much more demanded than those who are not producing anything. So they will begin to say, can I buy your land? And somebody will say, well, if that can make available to me resources which I need to feed my family today, why not? And so land is exchanging hands because some have greater capacity than others. Now listen to what the Lord tells them. I recognize the productivity of individual effort, meaning there are some things within capitalism that are inspiring. But I also call you specifically to be socialists. The alternative to capitalism is socialism. I call you to socialism because when you have been blessed and you have prospered, do not forget your brethren. Watch over them and take care of them. And I have given instruction that on the 49th year, you wind up your activities on all land that you bought that is not yours. And you give it back to the family that originally owned it. 49 years, God restores Israel to the original playing ground. The weak get back their land. The rich have already benefited from the land. So he says, now deal justly with one another. They are clever people who know that the 49th year is coming. This guy has money. So they will come to you and say, I'm selling my land. They will sell it to you because they know on the 49th year, you will return it. The Lord says, you shall sell them for the price of the years that remain. A God of justice. And so, if you have 25 years left, we will, do we call it pro rata? We will approach it pro rata. It's as expensive as the number of crops left. And he says here clearly, what you are buying is the crops. Because the land belongs to the Lord. And the Lord is going to give it back to the needy family. Everybody has a chance to begin again. Inherent within God's setting up of society is the mechanism that allows for individual effort and the mechanism that recognizes that people would never get out of poverty unless you create a system of rebooting. Reboot. You remember that word? Reboot. Start again. Play normal playing ground. If you have that background, you'll understand why Nehemiah was very angry in Nehemiah chapter 5. The women, the men that were poor, as he tried to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, came and cried and said, we are under such great pressure. The rich people have auctioned our land. They have taken our sons as slaves. They have instituted usury that is completely beyond us. We are enslaved. We now have nothing more to sell in order to get food. And Nehemiah is very angry. He confronts the rich and he challenges them to restore to the people what they have taken away. The human heart that is fallen and satanic has constant temptation to take advantage of other people, whether in matters of power, in matters of authority, in matters of finance, or any other matters. If you buy a plot of land today, don't be surprised if you come the next day and your neighbor wants to shift. He wants to shift the beacon, even by a meter. Even by a meter. It's amazing how human beings think. For things pertaining to me, I cut as much as possible. When it's my time to sell to you, I reduce as much as possible. So that injustice becomes the common play of society. And God is against this. And when you read other passages in the scriptures, and if you remember what Njonjo Mue told us here, when he came, God is particularly concerned that these matters be restored. In the book of Luke chapter 12, Jesus discusses with his disciples matters of greed. The parable of the rich fool. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you and I? An arbiter between you." Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them this parable: The rich ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God." I think you may remember from the last time I was here that I talked about dual citizenship. And I described the fact that we are citizens of heaven who, for the time being, are living as citizens of earth. Human beings are in a great challenge because they have this challenge of trusting a God whom they do not see versus dealing with bread that they can see. It's a bit like when they were in the when they were traveling to Canaan, and they complained against God, and God sent them serpents. Serpents bit them. When they cried out to the Lord told Moses, "Take a brazen serpent, lift it up. Whoever looks at the serpent will be free from the serpents on the ground." How does that happen? How does that happen? If you are facing a cobra, a live cobra, and for all practical purposes, you know what a live cobra can do. And the live cobra is sent to bite you. And so you are concerned about self-defense. And the Lord is saying, take your eyes off this cobra that has just stretched to bite you. Look at this one up here. The moment you do that, there will be an invisible glass between you and this cobra. It will not bite you. That is the challenge we face today. What's happening with this rich man? God has blessed him, his hard work. God is not complaining about his hard work. He's industrious. He has managed his resources well. The ground has yielded. When it has yielded, instead of giving thanks to God and honoring him, he now decides to say, "Look, whoever is up there is okay. Let him be at peace. I am now sorted. I don't need to pray anymore. I just need a good store. I don't even need to work." And God says, "When I have blessed you, I'm not blessing you so that you take your eyes off me and put it on the blessing." And for many of us, our challenge is that we can't withstand a blessing. We easily turn our eyes onto what we can see. It becomes our priority. It becomes our investment. It becomes everything that matters to us. We are afraid to give it away because we are afraid of next year. We are afraid of 10 years from now. We don't know that the God who provided for us when we were 5, provided for us when we were 10, provided for us when we were 15, provided for us when we were 30, is the same one today who is providing. It's like our eyes have suddenly been opened, and we now realize that we ought to approach things differently from the way we did 25 years ago. So God has watched over us, but we are not sure he can watch over us in the days coming. Now, what he has given me, instead of me using it to be a blessing to the people of God and to the kingdom, I want to store it so that I may be safe 20 years from now. There are Kenyans today who are given 100 million shillings to construct a road, who stashed away 50 million of it so that they may be safe 20 years from now, and did a poor job when the road that they constructed became potholed. They went and bought an SUV. This warped type of thinking where you imagine, actually one governor amazed me because he did that. He was asked, "Why did you buy an SUV?" He said, "Because of the potholes in my county." Doesn't even understand what it means to be a governor. So the concept of, are you going to focus on earth or are you going to focus above? The rich-poor divide begins because those that have been given capacity by God celebrate their capacity, refocus their attention from what is from God who gives to what God has given, specialize in how to multiply it, and expand means of how to get it, many times at the expense of those that don't have. Those that are poor find themselves in these unfortunate circumstances. They don't have the means of production. They don't have proper reward for their labor. They don't have enough even to meet their daily calories. And so they get themselves into this cycle of hand-to-mouth feeding. With time, that kind of living pushes them into a corner of bondage. And so many that are making money today are making it out of the blood of the poor. And this is what we ought to confront as a people of God. I want to suggest 4 ways in which we can do this. First, I want to suggest to you, maybe I just highlight something before I say them. Jesus faced the greatest challenge that any of us will ever face. We are here in 21st century. We can talk about the statistics and the poverty. It is nothing compared to what Jesus faced. When Jesus came, the entire world was in bondage. The entire world was corrupt. The entire world was in the grips of the satanic. Man was fallen. He was fallen in such a way that even if he wanted to fellowship with God, he couldn't enjoy the fellowship that we do. So his greatest challenge was to restore mankind. What was the order of his strategic plan? First, he dealt with the devil. The Bible says he was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. And he was tempted of the devil. And the Bible says he overcame. Do you remember that? Secondly, he announced his strategic plan. I will read this for you in Luke chapter 4. Verse 18. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." What am I going to be doing? I have just begun my ministry. I have been to prayer. I have overcome the demonic. I now want to tell you what I will do in the next 3 years. He announces his plan. Next, he identifies 12 individuals, commoners, people of the economy, people who survive, hustlers. Can you call them hustlers? Gideon Moy told us the word hustlers is not very good. I don't know whether you remember. It's not very good. But in Kenya, we use it to mean people who go about life every day. You know, as I drove here, I was thinking about it. Peter was an experienced fisherman and salesman. He went into the sea, fished, came, and sold. And when Jesus found him, he was thriving. Matthew, the tax collector, was a thriving civil servant of the Roman Empire when he was found. You know, if you go down the lives of these disciples, you will understand they were not people that are indifferent to the normal happenings in society. And so when Jesus is at work with them, they are careful to observe what is normal and what is abnormal. And by abnormal, I mean miraculous. This guy, you know, we are experienced. We know how the market works. But this guy This guy is operating differently. I think Peter and the team might have kept up with Jesus, if nothing else, just for the amazing nature of his different approach to this society. But they are following him. And what is he doing with them? First, clearly, he's preparing them to take over. Now, remember his vision. He has come to save the world. He has announced what he's going to do. What is his strategy? He looks for 12 people with whom he's going to work. He invests a lot of time in teaching them how the kingdom of God operates. He lives a life before them that reflects what God requires of them. He even sends them out sometimes to do some of the things that he is expecting them to do while he is gone. He interacts with their human, normal selfishness. The sons of thunder, they look at this guy, they say, this guy has a bright future. Look at the crowds that are following him. If Jesus was in Kenya today, I can tell you, NASA would be with him today, Jubilee would be with him tomorrow. The crowds that were following him, you know, they are attracted to the crowds. The politicians are asking, what's the real agenda of this guy? What is he really doing? The common people are saying, this guy who has given us bread for free, this is the kind of king we are looking for. And they want to make him their president. So all these normal dynamics are happening in society. But Jesus is living before them a godly life, a kingdom life, is demonstrating how the kingdom of God operates, and he is teaching them what they need to be doing as soon as they take over when he is gone. And then he works with them in the society, and his approach is to pronounce the good news, a different approach to life. The good news is really a different approach to life. And as I stand here, I want to suggest that the poor are poor because they don't have the good news. There is something good news that has not reached them. And when you read Jesus' good news in Luke 4:18, it's not only salvation of the heart. It's release from prison. It is release from blindness. It is release from poverty. It is release from oppressive political structures. It is an invitation to a new approach. Now, Jesus set up a team of 12. One of them fell off just before the cross. He replaced him with another one called Paul, whom you know. And in exactly 300 years of ministry, the church took over the Roman Empire. It wasn't the best decision, but it just shows us what could happen. How can somebody overturn a world system by starting with 12 people? That is one of the things we should interrogate. Because sometimes we think that the little effort you have done amounts to nothing. But if it is strategically done and the people you are dealing with are properly established on God's purposes, with time, the multiplier effect begins to consume the oppressive systems of society and begins to take over with a more just system. The mistake that the church did was to swallow the bait of taking over the kingdom, the Roman Empire, as you all know, in the days of Constantinople. And so there was no clarity between the church and government, and the church became responsible for the messes of government. So the calling is not really for us to take over government. The calling is, if there are any people here who are called and gifted to serve in government, we should bless them and work with them and support them to excel in that area. For us, Pastor Ondachi, the Bible says, as for us, we shall commit ourselves to the ministry of the word and to prayer. So there are people called to do various things. In my understanding, all of us as a Christian people are God's servants in the different areas in which we are engaged. If you are a doctor, you are serving God. If you are a business lady, you are serving God. If you are a driver, you are serving God. If you are a teacher, you are serving God. Each of us is a servant of God. But we are called to this specific space to show the light of Christ. But now, let me come to what I wanted to say, levels of engagement. First, we have identified a challenge, greed. which has resulted in the rich-poor divide. What we need to ask is, what is the demonic activity that is sustaining these systems? Because when we come here as a church, we come here to pray and to fast and to claim from God mercy and grace, and to ask that God will grant us so that these systems are broken. We will be asking for grace and wisdom to understand how things happen, to know what needs to be displaced and what needs to be replaced. So there is a place for prayer. There is a place for dealing with the demonic. I don't have a lot of time to talk about how the demonic controls power structures. But I will refer you, for example, to the book of Daniel chapter 9, where Daniel begins to pray intensely in fasting. And when Gabriel reaches him, he tells him, from the day you began praying, your prayer was heard, and an answer was released. But I have experienced a lot of warfare in the heavenlies. It's only now I have broken through to come. That doesn't mean the devil is powerful, all-powerful. It just means that there are certain disciplines to which God calls us, and as we engage these disciplines, he's actually building us up in the faith. Secondly, structural issues. When you have government systems, laws that are oppressive, that do not release the weak, that do not create room for operation, it's a very difficult thing for people to succeed. And so, as a Christian people, we engage structures at two levels. First, we call it advocacy. What is it we understand about the way society operates that can cause us to book an appointment with the powers that be and discuss this matter with them? When you invite the police here, you have done a very significant advocacy intervention. Because the next time you can walk to this office and say, we have a proposal of how the police can function here and function effectively. They will listen. Why? You are friends. You have invited them here. If you make a proposal that works, believe it or not, they will take it. Every time we are in society, we must confront the systems that exist that oppress people. I listened to Jonjo talk about land. In economics, there are four main resources. The first one is land and all that is on it or underneath it. Minerals, everything you can imagine. If you check Kenyans who is who, the rich-poor divide. The rich are those who have access to land. The poor are those who have minimal access to land. There are some poor who have access to land, but they don't have access to capital. The second one is capital. Capital to develop it, capital to manage it, capital to market it. The third resource is our labor. The fourth resource is our entrepreneurial ability. Now, when I don't have land and I'm a human being, as I am, what I have with me is my capacity to think and the physical strength that I have. So when I come to you asking to wash your car, I'm just saying, I have made a decision not to steal. I want to honor God. I haven't eaten for the last 2 days. Allow me to wash your car, pay me some money. I will not come to steal your property. Now, the young people at Kibera showed us that they have some energy, real energy. In just a few minutes, the whole railway line was uprooted. Just a few minutes. Think about that energy redirected against your gate. Again, there's nothing you can do that can stop these young people from getting to you if they want. No wall, no dogs, no cameras. Okay? So, rather than go the direction of extreme capitalism, where we make money, fortify our money, build walls around our money, keep it up with dogs and CCTV, trying to protect ourselves from these young people, we must look for a strategy of how to address the structures that keep them there, we must look for a strategy that directs us to interact with them in a way that gives them alternatives. And I want to suggest to you, we may not have the capacity to address the entire poverty situation in Kenya, but we can make a choice of a particular locality and we can change its circumstances. Jesus taught us that you can work with 12 and change the world. That is the point that I'm trying to make there. But we can also get engaged in terms of structures in determining who becomes our leader. Do you know which ward this is? Okay? Do you know which constituency it is? I was looking for you in Nairobi until I realized you are in Kajiado. See? So, who is the MCA? Who is the MP? Do they know Untitled Rongai in Nairobi Chapel exists? Should we take a step to invite them to come and fellowship with us one of the days? Tell them we are here. Should we tell them we are interested in what they are doing? We want to support the CDF activity, the what activity? You know, because these are the structures that make decisions over us. And there are some people here who are gifted politicians, but they are committed to Christ. And they are afraid to enter politics because of the dirt that is in politics. Because we are not thinking about it strategically, we have not determined to change the dynamics. I want to tell you, it takes about 1,000 to 5,000 votes to put in an MCA. An MCA does not need a lot of votes. Just about 1,000 to 5,000, depending on where you are. And so, if we want to change this thing of bribery, 5 churches the size of this one can put an MCA in without money. All we need to do is to determine that he has the right values. Actually, we just get one of you here who is called. If there are 20 of you that are called, we do our nominations in here. We vote. And then we determine and we agree. My brother, the one we choose is going to be the MCA. The rest of you, 19, support this one. We are not like the others. If you fail, you become an independent candidate. And then we decide, without exception, all of us are going to register here, and this is the guy we are voting for. That fellow will go in without any questions. Let me tell you what that will do. All the people who have spent money will be so shocked at the win. They will immediately mount a research to find out how this guy won this election without money. They will discover the church put him in. Next election, they will all be meeting here every Sunday. Every Sunday, all of them will be here. They'll be telling you, Pastor Odachi, whatever you want, we will do. You will have completely changed the way politics is done. And so, you can either do advocacy, wait for them to get into power and approach them, or you can actually determine who becomes by organizing ourselves strategically. That is at the level of structures. Now, structures are important because government operates by law, operates by policy. If you miss out at the law generation stage, there's nothing you can do. So in a sense, when you march because you are marching towards a particular law. If there is no law providing for what you are marching for, it will not happen. Because government operates according to law. So when they publish a bill, when you hear a bill has been published, don't think it doesn't concern you. Get interested. Let the lawyers in the house recognize that that is their calling. Let them come here, lawyers in the house. Don't let anything pass. Whenever a bill is published, come to pastor and say, I need 5 minutes on the program. Stand here and tell the people a new law has been published. This is what it is called. This is what it is aiming to do. We have met as a group of lawyers in the church. We have looked at this law. This is what is for us. This is what is against us. And this is how we are going to campaign against this bill. That's when you say, who here knows the MP? Who here is the sister of the MCA? You know, who here, you know, that is the time to structure the society. Whoever is here who is a cousin of the MCA says, I know the MCA, we tell him, produce that guy here next week. Yeah? Let him come here and tell him, we know you are our MCA. All these guys can look at you favorably if you block this thing. Yeah, I mean, that's how Mordecai did it. Mordecai realized a law had been passed to destroy the people. What did he do? He went into a frenzy. Nobody had told him it was coming. The law of the Persians, once it has been signed, cannot be revoked. It is decreed that Jews should be exterminated. Then he realizes there's a beauty pageant coming. The queen has messed. The king is looking for a replacement. He goes and looks for the most beautiful girl in among the Jews. Godly girl. Brilliant. Trains her. Sends her into the beauty pageant. She wins the pageant. She becomes the queen. The king doesn't know she's a Jew. Once she gets there, they are strategizing with Mordecai on what needs to happen. That law was not cancelled, but another law was passed. And that law said the Jews are allowed to attack and kill anybody who comes to kill them. So sometimes as church, we fail in our capacity to rescue situations because when things are being determined, we are not there. We are more in reaction mode. So there is work for our lawyers. I really appreciated Christian lawyers when we were doing the Constitution. God bless our Christian lawyers. They were with us 24 hours. I would be called by the nation. Somebody needs to be on TV this evening. And I would pick up the phone and call Anne and say, Anne, who can go for us? And there would be somebody. And so the structures of society are constructed at the level of law and at the level of policy. If you are a civil servant, you are a Christian brother, and you see a policy is being discussed that is detrimental to society, come here, raise it. Come to the church, raise it. Let noise be made. Let the right people be seen before it is passed. I keep telling people, one of my most painful moments in structural engagement was when we dealt with the late Mutula Kilonzo. Sorry for mentioning his name, but when you are in a congregation like this, you could mention a name and find you are on the wrong side. No ills intended. This just happened. The education bill, the church changed it 4 times. 4 times. The last time, we were in Jogo House until midnight. We initialed every page. The man changed it against the church. They were one of the most difficult engagements. So, when that happens, you go to the Lord and say, Lord, what you told us to do, we did. If it has passed, you will find another way. Just the way Mordecai told Esther. Who knows? You are in the kingdom for such a time as this. And if you do not intervene, the Lord will find another way. But you and your father's household will have no inheritance among the Jewish people. So when you see something as a person of God, understand that if you do not take action at that time, 10 years down the line, we will be seated like this, talking about the rich-poor divide. The third way of engagement is civic education. Supposing we identified a group of people whom we recognize are oppressed by the system. Let's suppose that we targeted 100 of them. And we went and we invited them. They came and sat here and we educated them. We told them, we know what you are going through. This church wants to pray with you. This church wants you to know that there are ways you can go about life. And we educate them. There are various things we could do to educate them. And then we come to church and we say, we have identified a group of 100 people. We are going to be working with them for the next 6 months. Next week, all of us will begin by prayer and fasting. will be praying and fasting for these people. Actually, I can tell you that there's one brother who is doing a marvelous job. I almost thought of calling him to come with me today. He has started something called Generation 2063. I don't know how many of you have heard of Generation 2063 in the house. Something called Generation 2063. He is getting groups of Christians like we are to pray and fast one day every week and to save the money that they should have used for their food. And they are linked up with somebody who would be described as poor anywhere in the country, across tribes. You don't support anybody from your tribe. And I can tell you, it is growing. And the testimonies that are being received from both sides are amazing. You are reaching out, you are praying, and what you should have eaten is going out to bless somebody. So there can be intervention. And my point is that we need to sit down and strategize on what we will do, and we probably will begin with what we can manage in our setting. That will grow to become a wildfire one of these days. And I want to tell you, you may not be able to change the top sometimes. If the ground moves, the top has to move. If the politicians are the best researchers you ever know about, they study the atmosphere daily. They know in this world, all the politicians know which places have more than 500 people meeting regularly. They know. They know. They do research. They even know what majority like. They know everything. They do research. So they will research. They will realize the ground has shifted. They come here with their money. Nobody turns up for the public meeting. They say we are giving money. Nobody's interested in the money. Why? You have worked with 100 people. You have empowered them. They know a different way of how to make money. They don't need this fellow's money. He will send researchers. He will discover the church has been here. Next time you see him here. And he'll be saying, what can we do to work together? You are influencing. There are 5 ways of how to get money. 5. If you know a 6th one, I really want you to let me know. 5 righteous ways. The first one is work. The scriptures command us to work for our income. So if anybody doesn't work, is advised not to eat. Little difficult to do. The second one is inheritance. Your parents can bequeath you, or whoever wants you to inherit them. The third one is investment. You make your money work for you. You invest it for a return. The return comes with a profit, hopefully. The fourth one is grants. You meet a person who likes you for whatever reason, and they just donate to you 10,000 shillings, you know? So a grant, you call it a gift, call it whatever, it's a grant. The fifth one is borrowing. You borrow. You go and say, please, I have this need, I need to buy this plot, give me some money, I will return it to you. If you know any other way of making money, I am very keen to learn. Okay? So when we go to empower these people, we are empowering them to be able to make money in any of these 5 ways. The most preferred is to work for an income. The least preferred is to borrow. And we keep telling people, don't borrow for consumption. If you are at the level of borrowing for consumption, you are in extremely dangerous ground. That is Nehemiah chapter 5. That's where you will find that your land has been taken, your children have been enslaved, you yourself are enslaved, and you are in absolute bondage. So borrowing is done when there is strategic thought and you want to get means. In this country, one of the tragedies is that there are many people, even in this city, who are below the poverty line, but they are below the poverty line because they have no means of how to work their land at home. There are many people in this city who live in the slum who are very rich in their rural. The structural problem there is that there is no marketing avenue. You know, as I prepare to come to speak to you, I just thought to myself, which kind of vegetables do the people of Untitled Rongai love? Which kind of vegetables? Because You can actually go to a community that is labeled below, a community that lives below the poverty line. You can teach them how to grow all the vegetables you want, and you can specifically determine to buy from them. You employ them. So when we leave church, we find all the tomatoes, all the cabbages, all the what, everything we are looking for that is agricultural, coming from a community that we have partnered with, that we are providing employment for. They don't have to go to Uchumi where they should bribe somebody to get space on the shelf. They don't have to do any of that. They just know that we have a market of 500 people who are supporting our labor. Those people will get out of the poverty line. The next thing I will say is this. I have been concerned about this matter for a long time. And I don't know, when I was here last time, some of you graciously bought the book that I have written. How many of you were able to look at it in any way? Let me just see so that I know. I know that reading is not one of Kenya's gifts. Our pastor has. That book suggests, or rather, expounds the scriptures where God actually instructs. Number one, that he's able to take care of all of us as God. So he's not limited in the way he can take care of us. Number two, it invites the people to recognize, thank you so much. It invites the people to recognize these 5 ways of access to money that I've talked about. It doesn't expound on them. It just, because I have said there are experts in those areas to whom I leave the expansion of that. My concern was to address the area of giving. This is what I have found. Nobody who earns 50 shillings a day and gives back to God in thanksgiving 5 shillings has financial problems. Did you hear what I said? That is what I have found. Amazingly. I mean, it's amazing that God can watch over people who worship him at whatever level. It's absolutely amazing. And so, in the last almost, how many years? 8 years, 85% of my sermons have been on giving. Because I realized that giving is an approach to worship that recognizes the provision of God. It runs counter to the rich fool in the Bible. This rich fool ought to have given to God. He ought to have gone back to God and said, look, I know there are many hungry people that need support. Lead me to them, let me support them. Because you will still command the ground next year to produce as much. He stopped farming. He now saw the maize as what was going to keep him for the rest of the 20 years. That is called idolatry. God is asking, who keeps you? The maize or God? So because he couldn't answer that question, he was told, now, you will not even eat any of it. Your soul is required of you this night. When we provide opportunity for people how to work, the next thing we teach them is how to give back to God in thanksgiving. And I have found that all people who work hard and give back to God prosper. I have found that. I have many testimonies I could give you on a morning like this. And so that is the area of civic education, civic education is bringing them here. We educate them on the various alternative ways in which they can function. The fourth area is what I've just been talking about. I call it individual or church engagement. As a church, we can put together a fund. We can put together a structure that allows us, we can put together a structure that then allows us to be able to engage with these people. And it's not a difficult thing. If we just decided one day we are going to take an offering, it will form a fund. When we go to those farmers and they tell us, I have no tools to farm, we'll tell them we can actually give you a short loan, you buy the tools, you will pay. They tell us we don't have fertilizers. We can create a system. And every year, we can take 10, 20, 30 people out of poverty because we have created a market for them. And so my brothers and sisters, the rich-poor divide happens because society misunderstands the initial provision of God and allows the capitalists among us to get more than their fair share. God decreed that every 50 years, things should be re-regularized. We as a Christian community can take this approach where every so often we actually should be re-regularized. We as a Christian community can take this approach where every so often we actually look at the community and we are able to reorganize things for the sake of our brothers and sisters. We can address structural issues, whether we do it by advocacy, by our participation in the election, or by our civic education to the people and our provision of a market. In the list that I gave you, from work to inheritance, to grants, to loans, we can see which of this area we can create an opportunity for the people to engage. And may the Lord bless you as you think about these things. Thank you.